Welcome to FO Talks. With me is Douglas Hauer, former partner at Mintz, who has been a practicing lawyer for almost 30 years. Today we're going to talk about the H-1B visa. So, Doug, on September 19th, the Trump administration imposed $100,000 of annual fee on new H-1B visas. What does this mean for A, employees, and of course, employers?
It means that if the executive order or proclamation actually is enforceable, meaning there isn't a court that blocks it and tells the administration to go back to the table and go through the process of comment of giving notice to the public and allowing the public to comment on this. Let's assume for a minute it doesn't get blocked. It doesn't go to any into any regulatory process. Then it would mean that employers who are impacted and who cannot prove that an employee is working in the national interest of the United States really would mean that employers are going to hire fewer H-1B workers. And that's going to have a trickle-down effect on people who are here on F-1 visas and who complete, say, 3 years of STEM optional practical training and then seek an employer for an H-1B visa. Though many of those individuals may just find that it's infeasible to get a visa, and they'll look to Canada or the EU or to other countries for employment.
When the announcement was first made, it seemed like the imposition was on everybody, but then there was a clarification from the White House that it was only for new applicants and not existing holders. Do you think this was a the administration backtracking, or was the information not disseminated correctly?
So I think there was some backpedaling. I think this administration is very vigorous about pushing out an idea or even an executive order. And then once the public understands what's going on and the lawyers around these agencies see the order, and I believe that the lawyers at the US Department of Homeland Security, Customs and Border Protection, and the State Department had no advance notice of this order. I have a good reason to believe that. Then I think what happened here is no one was given advance notice, and this administration often jumps into something that they have to then sort of walk back. And I think that the lawyers at these different agencies probably weighed in and explained to the administration that you can't have a retroactive rule, that it would have amounted to a retroactive imposition of what looks like an immigration tax onto people who are outside the US seeking to enter. So there was chaos, by the way. And the chaos specifically was at the US Customs and Border Protection facilities at airports in Canada that were supposed to be working on processing benefits for people, say, entering in L1 visas. Those US ports of entries were flooded with people trying to come back to the US on Saturday. It created tremendous backlogs. I have a client who waited 8 hours for an L1 to be processed. Normally, you would wait maybe a half an hour at Customs and Border Protection in Montreal or Toronto, and your L1 would be processed in 10 or 15 minutes. So I think that the administration was backpedaling and trying to create a barrier to litigation. In other words, had they allowed the regulation to apply over in an overbroad way, they just would have been sued.
Doug, I want to talk about the elephant in the room. So 70% or almost 70% of all H-1B visas are from India. It's about 400,000 people. This is really going to affect people from India who are seeking jobs in the US, especially in the IT industry. Do you see this as discriminatory, or do you see this as the administration making amendments to flaws that were in the system? Because, yes, a lot of people from India rely on the H-1B visa, but it had also been gamed heavily. There were a lot of parties that were making money out of it and exploiting people from India, and not just from India, but from Asia. So do you think It's a little bit of both, or it's one of the other.
Yeah, let me be clear. I think that this administration, that race figures into their policies on immigration all the time. And that is just an American approach to immigration. Our immigration laws come really from the 1880s when the United States government excluded Chinese immigrants and sought to limit the number of immigrants coming in from Asia, specifically China. We had the Chinese Exclusion Acts that were punishing and that resulted in families being separated and that resulted in fewer people coming to the United States to work. I think that you're seeing similar streams of racism coming into the Trump administration and how the Trump administration conceives of immigration. I think that there is a definite bias against India that's longstanding, that Trump didn't invent that. That bias against Indian immigrants goes back now close to 30 years. And the reality is that Indians are disproportionately impacted. This is going to have a sort of reset, I think, impact on relations between India and the United States to some degree, because part of the trade between India and the United States is in services. By the way, the United States has been the beneficiary of Indian H-1B work. Where would Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and Morgan Stanley, State Street, and J.P. Morgan, and every other large institution be if they never had H-1B workers? They never would have been able to utilize and leverage technology for innovation. So I do think this is racism and it's foolish. The $100,000 fee or tax that's being imposed is absolutely meant to block many people from coming to the United States who are from India. And I don't think there's any way around that.
Doug, very quickly, imagine there's a student from India who's in the US. He's on an F1. He or she is on an F1 visa, and they get hired by an American company. Till now it was happening that the company would sponsor the H-1B visa. What's going to happen now is who has to exactly pay the $100,000? Is it still going to be the company, or will the employee also somewhere have to make some concessions and chip in?
So my message to everyone who sees this would be, if an employer asks an employee to contribute to the $100,000 payment, that employee should not work with that employer. That, in my opinion, that's unethical. You can't ask somebody essentially to spend half a year working to pay an employer back for costs that the employer is going to incur to employ you. That amounts to a type of indentured servitude, which we don't have in this country. So these are fees that employers will pay. And by the way, I understand from friends I have who are in government affairs that one of the reasons the administration came to the table quickly was that large companies in the United States had government affairs lobbyists approach the Trump administration on Friday night and on Saturday morning. And many of these large companies are actually probably fine paying $100,000 for selected H-1B employees. And they actually had a huge influence on getting the administration to walk this back. But I would say that that these are going to be costs of an employer, and an employee should absolutely not agree to allow an employer to saddle them with any part of this type of payment. And that F1 visa holder that you're talking about, that young person at NYU or Worcester Polytech or wherever, I think that they need to have a serious a period of reflection on whether or not they want to stay in the United States. The United States is clearly proving to be unfriendly to immigrants, more so than ever, probably since the 1880s. And this isn't going to go away quickly. In other words, we may see Trump out of office in a few years, but we might see an administration come in that's even harsher. And by the way, that's bipartisan. As much as people want to attribute all of the horrific things we're seeing to the Republicans, well, the Democrats have sat on their hands as well for the past 20 some years and done nothing to reform our immigration system and to reform the H-1B program in meaningful ways to address legitimate concerns that certain Republicans have expressed about the program.
Right, Doug. Very quickly before we go. So, yes, big companies, and not just big tech, but even companies in the financial sector have basically put their foot down, and they're demanding, not just requesting, they're demanding the administration to roll back. But do you think the government is going to listen, or do you think they're going to ignore and completely end the H-1B program? Or do you think there is hope for some reform and maybe just tighter entry criteria?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think that these companies coming to the table are the reason we saw all the agencies get together on Saturday to explain what the law meant or what the new executive order meant. But the large players like Amazon, Microsoft, Goldman Sachs, they have other issues that they're lobbying the government for. Immigration is one. And the extent to which any of these key players are going to go to bat for immigration is questionable, especially when the very players that can afford government relations and can actually support that function, frankly, they can pay $100,000 per person to hire an H-1B worker. Now, there's another angle here, too, that's critical. We know that there's going to be a national interest waiver exemption from the fee. And I think that what we might see is this administration treating certain types of industries as in the national interest. For example, artificial intelligence. I could see our AI, companies focused on AI, being able to receive exemptions. I could also foresee med tech, certain healthcare institutions that hire H-1B workers, including hospitals. I could also envision certain players in tech where that tech is critical, ranging from satellite technology up through developing chips. We might see that there are actually fairly broadly construed exemptions that are going to be at play here if the law isn't fully walked back or if a judge doesn't stop this administration from implementing it.
Thank you again, Doug, for talking to Fair Observer and for clarifying what's happening and for basically giving an idea of what to expect further.
Great to speak with you. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.